Hi everyone, this is Jeff.
And this is Russ.
When we first started Home on the RNG, we began it as a series of videos, and we produced quite a few before we realized it really works better as a podcast.
Whoops-a-doodle.
So we apologize if any of these early episodes have any visually heavy references that don't transfer to the audio medium.
Whoops-a-doodle.
Thanks for listening. Everybody,
Hi!
welcome back to Home on the RNG.
It's been a month and we're wearing the same clothes.
As always, as is tradition. Not that you can see our clothes if you're listening to the podcast.
True, yes. Just know we are wearing clothes.
Mostly. So, as is tradition, we're gonna take a look back at the last 9 games that we played. We're gonna talk about some tropes. We're gonna talk about the highlights, the lowlights. It's just a way to try and keep these games fresh in our minds, because it's so easy to just remember, the last thing you played, and to forget about, as I look back over this, we played Final Fantasy Tactics in this group. I'd completely forgotten that.
We did. We did. We both played Final Fantasy Tactics.
We played Octopath Traveler in this group.
We did play Octopath Traveler in this group.
I forgot Octopath Traveler existed.
I played Octopath Traveler 2 years ago. So, almost 2 years ago.
We have been on a little bit of a hiatus.
Yeah.
Though. Okay.
We have been.
So,
just a quick FYI, I did subscribe to Lowlights magazine when I was a child.
God. So, the first trope we're going to talk about is the trope of priests save your souls and your game.
Yes.
Now, this one was kind of prevalent in the earlier ones that we played, and then we hadn't seen it for a while, but it did come back with Lufia 3.
Yeah. Priests have always saved the game in Lufia.
And they hopefully always will.
Yeah, whenever we get Lufia 5, is what we would be on now. I don't know. Our next trope is the option to join the dark side. This didn't really technically happen in any of the games we played, although honorable mention is Final Fantasy IV, given out that you actually start out working for the bad guy. You are kind of the bad guy at the beginning of Final Fantasy IV. You're a real dick.
So what
Cecil
kind
is a
counted?
real dick at the beginning of the game.
Ancient robots in a fantasy setting only happened once, which is surprising because I
That
feel
is
like
also
it's much more
surprising.
common. Final Fantasy Legends 2, you could be a member of your party.
That's true. The odd thing about Final Fantasy II is that because you explore different worlds, there are kind of different time periods of I understand what you're saying, because none of the worlds that you visit are actually futuristic.
Well, there's one that's kind of steampunkish But the thing is, it's robots in ancient robots in a fantasy setting.
And you can pick a robot.
You start in a fantasy setting.
You do, and you can pick a robot as a party member.
So, next.
Next we have the final boss has multiple forms. This is still stuff that goes on today, so there were a lot in this category. But not every game.
Shockingly.
Yeah, we had Final Fantasy Tactics, Lunar 2, Final Fantasy Mystic Quest, which is weirdly one of my favorite final boss fights.
I can see that,
in
actually.
any video game. I remember...
Just heal him to death?
You can heal him to death, but as a kid, as a child, between the music that plays in the final boss battle...
That's a great score.
I know we're not big on music, but Final Fantasy Mystic Quest actually has such a great score.
It does.
That final boss theme is spectacular. And just to point out, 2 of his forms, one of them is a giant spider, and then a giant spider with tentacles. It scared me to death as a kid. Once he got to giant spider with tentacles, and back then I wasn't aware that you could just use the life spell on every form and kill that form. So Yeah, that was a scary, scary boss fight. Can we add a category that is just like best final boss fight? Just so that I can say.
You know what? I don't see why not.
Okay. Anyway, sorry I derailed that.
No, this is what this is for. We reminisce.
Octopath Traveler had multiple final bosses in Primrose's
boss.
story,
Not every boss had multiple forms.
Not every boss had multiple forms.
That game is structured weird, and it's going to show up in this list a little weird.
Yeah.
Because each story kind of has its own...
Yeah, because I think you and I both, didn't we both just play 4 out of 8 stories? So I don't even know what every final boss is in this game.
True.
But anyway, and then Golden Sun. Golden Sun has multiple forms at the end. I'm surprised it wasn't every single game, but...
And there actually is one trope we hit more. And I'm surprised that one's not in every game. But that's not what we're talking about next. Next is the surprise boss category. And what's fun this time, I always use the same example for what is a surprise boss. And that example is actually in the list this time. So, normally these are in order that we played them when I list the games off. This one's not going to be, because the surprise boss is like Final Fantasy IV. It is, you play through the game and you know who your enemy is. It's Golbez. Golbez is screwing everything up. Golbez is a monster. Golbez must be stopped. And then with like 5 hours left in the game, it's, oh, Golbez is being controlled by this other guy. Go kill him.
Mm-hmm.
And now Zemus or Zeromus. And even then, it's Zemus is the bad guy. Until you get all the way up to the end of the final dungeon. So, like, surprise, Zemus is the boss. Then you get to the final dungeon, watch Zemus get killed, and Zeromus is created, and that's your final boss. Yes. That's what the surprise boss is. It's the end boss you never knew was going to be the end boss. So Zeromus is on here for Final Fantasy IV. Final Fantasy Legend 2 had Arsenal. Mm-hmm. Because you went through this entire game, and then you fought a robotic self-defense system as the end boss, which was very strange. And Lufia 3 had Zalbrek as the surprise mystery end boss instead of the Sinestrals.
Right. Which, the interesting thing to me about Lufia is that it gave you a surprise boss, whereas Lufia 2, I was expecting a surprise final boss, because if you don't just skip the opening of Lufia 2, then there is like another evil guy that Aram talks to at the beginning who's controlling all of the Sinistrals. So I was like, oh, we're going to fight all the Sinistrals, and then we're going to fight this other evil guy, and we didn't.
Nope.
And I just thought that's so weird. So I was Anyway, it's interesting to me.
You want to talk about surprises, though? You want to talk about the unexpected?
I do want to talk about surprises. So, our next category, this is surprising. So, silent protagonists.
Which is ubiquitous in
I
JRPGs,
there are
right?
So many silent protagonists.
Every JRPG has a silent protagonist. That's you make jokes and memes about it.
Chrono is the silent protagonist.
All JRPG protagonists are silent. So, out of the 9 games we played, how many silent protagonists did we have?
We had 1.
1 out of 9.
1 silent protagonist in Golden Sun.
See, it's surprising to me how not prevalent this is.
I mean, in this batch of games, definitely. And, I mean, if we're going to be technical, I know we haven't played it yet, but in Golden Sun 2, he is not silent.
He opens his mouth.
Because in Golden Sun 2, he is not the protagonist. So now but he's there.
Spoilers.
So now he can talk.
I haven't played that yet. I don't know anything about it. I'm glad this one was handed to me because I think I made a mistake when I constructed this list on this one. A fight you're supposed to lose. Which is always... It's interesting from a narrative standpoint, but frustrating from a gameplay standpoint, because the game doesn't tell you you're supposed to lose, and unless it's super obvious, there have been times where I've thrown everything I could at where you're using up stuff you shouldn't, because you're just supposed to lose.
What I like is when they do this in Tales games, I feel like do this a lot, is where they give you a fight that you're supposed to lose, but you can win.
I do like that.
And then you'll get, even if the reward for doing it is just different dialogue, I do like taking on those challenges.
So in Lunar 2, there was a fight against, I'm going to pronounce this name wrong, Galleon?
Galleon.
That you were supposed to lose. Lufia 3 had multiple fights you were meant to lose. Basically, every time you go up against a Sinestral, you're supposed to lose until the end. Golden Sun, you fight the mysterious duo at the beginning of the game. You are very much supposed to lose that one. Final Fantasy IV is where I feel like I messed up, because I have here fighting Kain and Cecil Inner Struggle you're supposed to lose, but that's not quite accurate.
Well, the Kain one is true.
Yes, the Kain one is true. The Inner Struggle you don't lose, you just endure.
Yes. The Inner Struggle is the infamous Final Fantasy IV boss fight where Paladin Cecil is fighting his Dark Knight self, and in the Japanese version of the game and later versions of the game, it makes sense.
You understand, yeah.
You understand because he's only using the ability that drains his own HP, but because they took that out of the original version of the English game, there is no indication in that version of the game that you're supposed to just endure.
But I could also argue the battle against Titan, when Titan is summoned and causes the earthquake, you're kind of supposed to lose that one. The battle where adult Rydia comes back, you're supposed to be losing up until she shows up.
Right.
So
there's actually multiple examples.
Yeah, it's hard to pin down exactly in Final Fantasy IV. Like, I'm giving Final Fantasy IV some wiggle room, where we're just going to say it happens multiple times, because there's a little where it's like mostly, but not quite, but some. Anyway, and then lastly, in Phantasy Star 2, you have first Nay, and then Army Eyes. And I did some digging online, and it turns out if you actually do beat Army Eyes, it breaks the game.
Oh.
You are not meant to win that battle.
Yeah, I definitely don't like that. And I'll point out that in Lufia 3, you actually, is an example of what I like, that first battle against Gades, you actually can win.
Oh, yeah.
And not only can you win it, but you get a super, 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 super strong piece of armor that will make, you can equip on your main character.
Don't you get something awesome for each of them if you beat them?
I think you do. I know, because I've seen it in speedruns, which I have gotten really into lately, is that it's a speedrun strategy to win that first battle against Gades, and then you can equip your main character with this piece of armor, and he can't be touched.
This is a frame perfect trick.
Until it is a frame perfect trick.
Yeah.
Okay, so now our next recurring theme is gambling minigames. Whenever I think of gambling minigames in a RPG, I think of Dragon Quest.
I do too, because they've made that casino just such a part of the experience.
Every game since Dragon Quest 3 has had such a good casino, and I actually enjoy it, is the thing. I don't like to go on mini game side things a lot in games, but I like the gambling in Dragon Quest. But we didn't play any Dragon Quest.
Oh, you know what we also... Well, I'll talk to you about it later. There's a game we left out of our when we were constructing a list of what we're going to play.
So the gambling minigames in this group of games, Lunar 2 had a dice minigame. Lufia 3 had a character. Ruby's special attack is a minigame where you try to guess if the second card is higher or lower than the first card. And then in Golden Sun, there was a town full of minigames.
Yep.
And that's,
I never spend a lot of time with these, really.
I don't spend a lot of time with them either, again, except for Dragon Quest. There's something about gambling in Dragon Quest that always captures me.
So our last trope for this batch is, I'm fairly certain, a new one that I introduced just for this. It encompasses 6 of the 9 games with a 7th honorable mention. So it's
almost everything.
Almost every game, and I'm telling you, Final Fantasy IV barely avoided being on this list, and I'm not 100% sure Phantasy Star 2 shouldn't be on this list. Honestly, I think I did my research, and I think it barely skirts by.
The protagonist of Phantasy Star 2,
we haven't said what it is yet.
Oh.
Only teenagers can save the world.
That's true.
Final Fantasy Legends 2, your characters are school kids. In Final Fantasy Tactics, Ramza is 16. I did research for this. In Lunar 2, Hero is 16 or 18, depending on the English or Japanese version. Final Fantasy Mystic Quest, our epic hero Benjamin is 16.
He is 16. He doesn't have enough allowance
in
to pay Tristram for the elixir.
in Lufia 3, Wayne. I couldn't find proof that Wayne is a teenager, but it seems very likely.
He probably is, yeah.
Golden Sun, the main character, the silent protagonist, is 16. And an honorable mention for Octopath Traveler, Tressa is 18. All of the other characters are in their 20s to 30s.
I was actually impressed with Octopath Traveler that they only have one 18-year-old character, and I want to say Cyrus or whatever is like 35.
So you want... Yeah, I know. That was impressive. So you wanted to mention Phantasy Star 2 in this group?
No, I think in Phantasy Star 2 the main character is supposed to be 20. So I really...
Just barely skirts it.
Just barely skirts it.
And Cecil is like 22.
Yeah.
He's a grizzled general.
He's the grizzled general of the Baron Red Wings.
He is 22 and Kane is like 24.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, now we want to review some topics. Let's see. Let's say best game for last. What do you think?
Sure.
What was, for you, the worst game of this group of 9? Now, I want to refresh... I should have done this at the start, but I didn't. So, the 9 games we played in this group are Final Fantasy Legends 2, Final Fantasy Tactics, Lunar 2, Final Fantasy Mystic Quest, it was a Final Fantasy heavy grouping, Octopath Traveler, Lufia 3, Golden Sun, Final Fantasy 4, and Phantasy Star 2. I want to point out we have 4 Final Fantasy games in this batch.
Well,
and they're all in different series.
Yeah, sometimes that's what I'm going to say. It's hard to get away from Final Fantasy sometimes.
That is because we don't do the same series twice in a batch, but we have 4 Final Fantasies and didn't break that rule. So, of those, what was the worst game for you?
The worst game for me is just my own personal bias. And it's Final Fantasy Tactics.
Oh, God.
Because I just don't like... The only tactical role-playing game series that I like is Fire Emblem, which we debated heavily about in the Final Fantasy Tactics review, and I just don't like it. I just don't like tactical RPGs with that one exception. The story, like we said in the review, which I do remember, that was one of my favorite games to review, I liked the story. I watched YouTube videos of the story of that game.
What about the incidental sound effects?
And actually really liked it, and I did like the incidental sound effects as well.
I know, I have a weird obsession with...
Playing the early parts of that game where you just have a bunch of squires and chemists, and you're just very slowly watching these battles play out, and a character dies and they turn into a crystal and you have to revive them before blah blah blah. It is not my thing. It is not my thing at all. I enjoyed watching a YouTube video of the cutscenes.
Okay. Well, you're wrong. But
if taking that personal bias out of it, Phantasy Star 2 would be the worst.
That is what I selected. I almost picked Lunar 2. If you remember, I was really fired up in that review.
Yeah.
But Phantasy Star 2 is the worst. I wasn't as fired up in that one because I'm exhausted. Life has come at me with a stick. I can't work up that level of histrionic anger that I like to do. But Phantasy Star 2 beat Lunar 2 as the worst because it felt like the game didn't want me there. The game wanted nothing to do with me. I was an inconvenience to the game as the player. The only real gameplay element to it was those massive mazes, and and when you get into a combat, your orientation changes afterwards, so they're designed to just suck. Anyway, my worst was Phantasy Star 2, your second worst was Phantasy Star 2.
Right.
My second worst was Lunar 2, which you love.
It's my favorite game ever.
Although I like to think I took some of the shine off it for you. Because and just to remind you all, there is a dramatic turning point in Lunar 2 where your friend is going to be executed, and she's the only thing that can help save the world. And the character asks you, you've been traveling with her, is she a destroyer of worlds? And the canon response the answer you can give, because you pick yes she is, which is obviously wrong, or only once a month. You make a period joke while your friend's life is on the line. I just want to remind you about that in Lunar 2. Anyway, let's do the best character. From these 9 games, who is your favorite character?
My favorite character from these 9 games is character C.
Okay,
From Phantasy Star 2.
I'll talk about my best character while Russ thinks about his. For me, the best character of this grouping is Kain. It helps that I love the game, Final Fantasy IV. But I also really liked Kain's story arc. It's something, like, especially when I was younger, that I identified with a lot. That his major conflict is that he's in love with his best friend's girl. He's in love with somebody that not only can he not have, but he can't even try to have because of how loyal he is to the friend. That sort of hopeless romanticism is something I really identify with, especially in my younger years. And because of that flaw in that inner conflict, yes, he's able to be controlled by the enemy because he's got this weakness inside of him. He's got this conflict he doesn't know how to resolve. And especially in early JRPGs, I think that's a lot of nuance to put into a character. Also, he's kind of badass. His design is great. He's a strong fighter. I love the jumping tactic. So, I also like that he's kind of the main character's older, smarter, stronger friend.
Mm-hmm.
So, I like Kain a lot. I like the nuance. I like his weaknesses. I like his strengths. Kain's my boy.
Good choice.
Who was your best character?
I'm going to say, so that I don't also just say Kain, because I do like Kain. I like Kain a whole lot. I'm going to go with Ophelia from Octopath Traveler.
Okay.
I was really into her. I picked Tressa, the merchant, the 18-year-old
I'm actually a little surprised you didn't go with Tressa.
Yeah, I picked Tressa as my first character because she's just the young girl with the heart of gold. She's the merchant. She wants to leave her family's house and open her own store and just be a really successful merchant. And so I was drawn to her as my main character. So I picked her as my main character, but I recruited Ophelia pretty quickly as one of the 4 that I did the complete story for. One of my favorite, things in anime is just young women doing their best. Just young women doing their best.
Yep, that's his genre.
Ophelia's whole story is that her sister, she's adopted, she's like a war orphan. And her sister Liana is supposed to be, they're both clerics, and Liana is supposed to do this pilgrimage around the world. Kind of like Final Fantasy X, and she's going to light the lanterns of the gods in all the temples around the world, and then their father gets sick and dies eventually. And so Ophelia, so that Liana can be by her father's side, Ophelia takes over the ritual, and that's why she's going around the world and lighting all the lanterns and everything. And then the situation gets pretty dark when Ophelia is lured in by this weird cult. And it's just, I just really ended up liking that story because it's just about 2 young women
doing their best.
Just 2 sisters, figuring out their feelings and testing the familial bond that they have. And during Ophelia's final boss, there's a whole big, voiced cutscene that takes place in the middle of the battle that I just think is just really good and really exceptional. And for most people who are really into shonen anime about boys doing their best, and they make the big victory speech about I'm gonna beat you down and I'm not gonna let any of this bad stuff happen, and Ophelia does that, and I just really enjoyed it. I really liked her, and Christina V did her English voice actress, and I think she did a phenomenal job in all of the voiced scenes through that whole game as I played it. Whenever Ophelia guards against an attack, she goes, she says, "You will not And I love it, and I kept saying it over and over again. Every time I defended with...
I'm sure you did.
Every time I defended with any character, I would go, "You will not!"
So adding best and worst character is something new to this batch. I like to think that every time we do one of these roundups, I'll think of new things we can add and discuss. I'm very happy that I added them now, because this has been fun. So, who was the worst character of this batch?
The worst character was probably character C from Phantasy Star 2.
Okay, so for me...
No, I'm really kind of serious. I think the worst character in this whole batch was the thief.
The thief from Phantasy
Star 2.
Okay. Go on.
I'm like, you broke into my house, and you're a thief. So your intentions breaking into my house were probably not so just as to be like, I'm going to travel with you and help you save the world. You were probably just trying to, steal my antique heirloom vase to sell. She just has no purpose in that game. And she joins you so late in that game. It's like, why did you even do this to me? Why did you even inflict this other person on me?
So I just now realized my worst character is actually, in many ways, a dark mirror version of my best character. For me, the worst character was Ronfar from Lunar 2.
Yeah.
Ronfar was a priest, but then he was in love with somebody he couldn't be with. And because of that, he became a womanizing, drunk gambler. Nihilistic. Like, he threw away all pretense at life and just became a despicable, womanizing pervert.
Yeah.
Because he couldn't have the woman he wanted.
Ronfar is a character that has not aged well.
And I will never forget the moment where they go into a town and they're like, there's a lot of thieves in this town. Protect your valuables. And Ronfar covers his crotch.
Yeah.
The priest covers... And his response to being in love with a woman he can't have is to just sleep with all the women.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're supposed to feel for him when we talk about his one true love. Like, no, dude. Like, you look at Cain. Cain did everything he could to make himself the best, despite this conflict in his heart. Ronfar had this conflict and threw everything he was away. And until really this video started filming, I'd never connected the two of them. But it is interesting to me now that my best character and my worst character basically are that way because of how they dealt with the same problem.
Yeah, it's true.
Screw Ronfar.
Yeah, Ronfar. Yeah, I agree. Ronfar is not a good character, especially in Me Too era. Ronfar is not.
Ronfar's terrible.
Ronfar, terrible.
So the most surprising game, for me, it was Lufia: The Legend Returns, what we've been calling Lufia 3. Yeah, it was surprising to me because for a Game Boy Color game, it really did a lot. That 9-member party grid for combat was interesting, and the menus were a bit difficult to navigate, but that's just because there were so much of them. The game accomplished more on a Game Boy Color than I would have thought possible. So for me, it was the most surprising game because it delivered more than I could have expected from it. How about you?
My most surprising, in two different ways, was Octopath Traveler.
Okay.
And the reason is because I was super excited. Octopath Traveler was a new game when we played it,
yes,
which is not a thing that we had really done on the series before.
We might do it moving forward,
yeah,
depending on how schedules work. Although, never mind.
Anyway, it was a new game that we played. So in Octopath Traveler, I was really excited about it because I had played Romancing Saga 3 in the past, and it looked kind of like a spiritual successor to that. I was super excited about the 8 characters, and you pick your character, and you have different stories depending on who the characters are. And then the way the story... I like the game. I like the game overall, but the way that the stories played out, I was surprised by how they did it, and that I didn't like it as much as I thought I would.
Yeah.
Because you pick it like the way we played. We picked our and you can the way we played. You can pick your party of 4. I picked my party of 4, and then I played each of the 4 chapters for those 4 characters. But none of the other characters participate in any other character's chapter. So they are 100% self-contained stories that are playing out as if you only have one character, as if that one character is alone. And I was disappointed by that, but I still liked the individual stories. What I was surprised by is that I know you are very into stories of games, and so am I. What I was surprised by is that in the last couple of years, just because of various things going on in my life, not having as much time to game, blah, 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 I've started appreciating video games in different ways. And what I realized is that while the story stuff about Octopath was maybe a little disappointing, the absolute freedom of what you can do in Octopath and the ways that you can use abilities and you can use different things to break the game, what I have started liking is really breaking video games. And you can do that in so many interesting ways in Octopath. The merchant class gives you an ability where you, for money, you can hire like bandits or mercenaries or people to come fight for you in battle, and they do like these huge amounts of fixed damage, and you can do like 20,000 damage on bosses at the very beginning of the game if you manipulate other systems to just have enough money to hire those characters at the beginning of the game. You can turn on an ability to greatly decrease the amount of random battles that you get, and then you can use save file manipulation to literally never get into a battle as you run across these vast areas. And you can make it all the way to the last areas of the game, at the very beginning of the game. I love what I ended up thinking that I was going to love about Octopath was the story and characters, and what I ended up actually loving about Octopath was all of the ways that you can manipulate and break and play this game absolutely any way that you want. And it kind of contributed to a change in the way that I play all video games.
Interesting.
And it was very surprising in a very good way. So for that, Octopath Traveler has become one of those games that kind of means more to me than just being a good video game that I enjoy. It actually kind of changed the way that I play things.
Well, congratulations,
So,
Octopath.
yeah.
I hope there's an Octopath Travelers 2. I genuinely do.
It's a mobile phone game, so they've already made a mistake.
Never mind. I hope there's never an Octopath Travelers 2.
So,
Damn it.
it exists.
What was surprising to me about Octopath Traveler was, like, how cool the game looked. In all the previews,
Yes.
before we got the game, I was just like, oh my god, that game looks amazing. And it does. But after about 5 hours, you're numb to it.
Yes.
Like, by the time
right.
I don't care what the game looks like anymore by the 5 hour mark. I'm playing this game. It's fine. It was surprising to me how that effect did not last.
Yeah.
So again, a little bit, it's, what I went in expecting to love was not, so that is interesting.
That was absolutely, yeah. It was totally unexpected.
So which of these 9 games was the best game for you?
I would have to say Octopath Traveler.
Well, for pretty much the reasons you just described.
For the same reason, because like Earthbound and like a select few other games, there is something, Chrono Cross, it means something more than just this was a good video game. Earthbound is the game that brought us together. Chrono Cross is the game that made me even pay attention to or appreciate music in video games. Octopath Traveler changed my outlook on the way that I played video games, and that you don't have to do it in one very specific way. So,
I'm sorry to tell you this, but you're wrong.
Fair.
The best game out of this bunch was almost Final Fantasy Tactics, and I have a feeling in almost any other group, Final Fantasy Tactics would have taken it for me, because I love that game. But Final Fantasy IV will always be in my top 5 JRPGs. I played it when I was younger. I love the characters like they're friends of mine. I love the story. even though it's more on rails than a lot of JRPGs, I'm somehow okay with that. I love the character system. They changed it a bit in the newer versions, but one of the problems I have in a lot of JRPGs is I get comfortable with my characters. When I play Final Fantasy VII, for example, my party is usually Cloud, Barret, and Tifa. And they're like the first characters you get.
Right.
But like, they're my guys. I'm done. I'm set. I don't experiment. I do that with a lot of the games, and I just get, even when I replay it, like, no, I take who I'm comfortable with. Final Fantasy IV rotates out the party for story-based reasons, and it makes you spend time with all of them. And there are sections where you've got like 3 mages in your group, so your tactics change. You play the game a different way than you normally would because of what you got available to you. I like that the game forces me to experience new things that way, and I like that it's so heavily tied to the story as to why. So apart from just loving the characters and loving the story, which I do, I like the mechanics of it. The rotating out of people. I love the stories of redemption that are all over the place. I love the goofy, I'm going to sacrifice myself for everybody. So I jump out of the pit with a bomb strapped to my chest. I blow it up. I fall about 5 miles. Yeah. I land on the rocks, and I sleep it off.
I was going to say, you just take a nap. Sid might be the most... Sid is Chuck Norris, basically.
Yeah.
Sid is just Chuck Norris.
Yang's not much better. I'm going to go in, lock myself in a room, and have a whole bunch of cannons blow up in my face. So you better go get a frying pan for my wife and hit me over the head to wake me up. Like...
There's something, though, about jumping out of an airship 100 miles
Yo, that
to the
one
ground.
Wins. That one wins.
And literally blowing yourself up.
He suicide bombs himself and sleeps it off. I love Final Fantasy IV. I will always love Final Fantasy IV. I don't care what other games we discover. It will always be in my top 5.
I think that's very interesting because I could have said most surprising for me was Final Fantasy IV because for all the reasons that you have listed, as I said before, the way I've played games recently has changed. It has actually really dipped that game on my list of favorite Final Fantasies. Wow. Because I am at the point, again, just where I am with games, that the linearity bothers me. The fact that they always tell you who you have to have in your party bothers me. Every time I get to the point when I get to the point that you have to go to like the Dark Elf Cave and you have to change all your equipment, so you have to take all your good like sword and everything off Cecil, that just annoys me. That is just annoying to me now.
But now you get to come up with new strategies.
That it's not letting me play the game in the way I want to play it. Whereas a game like Octopath Traveler does absolutely nothing but let me choose exactly what I want to do.
I feel personally attacked that you don't like Final Fantasy IV as much now.
It's just a change. All I'm saying is that people change, everything changes.
I feel attacked.
And I feel, for me personally, it is interesting how I used to say the same thing. I used to say, oh, Final Fantasy IV is absolutely my favorite Final Fantasy. And now it's like...
It is much more on rails than...
6 or 7 on the list of Final Fantasy.
Wow.
Yeah, it is way down there.
Wow. I'm not happy about that
Just
at all.
Just on the list of Final Fantasy.
It is much more on rails than I usually like in a game.
It gives you the illusion that you're have an airship and you can fly around and everything, but it is very much always making you go, with the exception of a couple of times where you can go get side quests.
I actually like you a little less now.
It's making it, that's fine.
Okay. So, there it is. 9 games down. On to the next batch. And we have got a doozy to start it off with for you. I have dug up a secret hidden gem from the ancient land of Japan.
That's probably kind of racist. So.
No, it would have been racist if I said the Orient,
Yeah,
which I
that's true.
really avoided saying real hard.
And I made you say it.
Because you could feel it coming.
That's what I could feel coming. I'm like,
I was like,
this is going to get a little racist right
No,
here.
it's from... Japan is an ancient land.
Japan is an ancient land, so...
And it's mysterious to us because we're not Japanese. Everything that's not American to me is mysterious. The mysterious land of Canada.
Canada is pretty mysterious.
No, we are playing a game that never has had an official U.S. release, but there was a fan patch out, and I wanted a piece of it. Join us next time for a game we're going to argue about quite a bit. Live a Live.
Yikes.
For the Super NES.
Yikes.
We'll see you guys next time.
Bye.
Home on the RNG is a presentation of Mad Centaur Productions. You can find Jeff on youtube.com/Centaur Productions or on Twitter at Jeff Centaur. You can find Russ on Twitter at RussMac25. Thank you for listening, and remember, it's dangerous to go alone. Take this podcast with you.